Okay.
Are you talking to me or?
We just restarted the recording. That's all. For those who are watching, we had a bit of a break there because we're trying to get the sound a bit better.
Okay.
So Chris Catling was somebody you knew then from
No, I didn't know Chris. I knew of him because I'd played cricket up in Lancashire here against the team that he in the village where he lived, which was called Milnrow, which is the other side of Rochdale. So I didn't know Chris, but obviously I got to know him when I moved to Coventry. But and then he just moved to Brighton anyway. But yeah, I mean, to me, being at the age of 20 and playing against the likes of Ernie Hunt, Billy Carr, and Bill Glazier in goal, you know, it was a big thing for me to play against a big team with respect. You know, we expected to lose because they were a top division side and we were a third division team. So you kind of expected to lose, but just hoped it might go your way. And in the end, it did go our way.
So you're from Haywood originally, David. So you grew up in the era of the Busby Babes when you were a young boy. And of course, there was the ups and downs of Manchester City until the late 60s. But were you a Rochdale fan or did you support one of the bigger clubs?
Well, because my family, my mum and dad were from Newcastle, all of them, I have 3 elder brothers and we were all Newcastle United fans because of the kind of the Geordie upbringing. I didn't live in Newcastle ever, but my father moved around the country because he worked for the RAF and he worked at various places around the country. One was Kent, where one of my brothers was born. One was Coventry, strangely enough, where one other of my brothers was born. And then Rotherham, where another of my brothers was born. And then they moved to Haywood, which is where I was born.
Oh, right.
So I supported Newcastle United because that was the family tradition.
Oh, so you remember the last time they won a trophy then, the FA Cup, a domestic trophy anyway.
Yeah.
So that cup upset against Coventry, who did you play in the 4th round?
A good question because we won that one, I think. You know, I honestly can't remember.
I'm just looking up now. It was Colchester.
It was Colchester. And I think we drew at their place, and then beat them here, beat them up at Rochdale.
No, you drew at home 3-3.
All right. Oh yeah, then.
And you lost 5-0 in the replay.
Did we? Right.
But that was the year Colchester went on to beat Leeds, I think.
Yes, absolutely right. You're spot on, and you're bringing it all back to me now because we knew, because it was a replay, we'd heard the draw for the next round, and we knew that if we could beat Colchester, we would play Leeds, which was massive for us. But yeah, you're right. Colchester beat us. Well, the big centre forward for them got a hat trick that night, should I say? Yeah. Can't think who it was. He was a famous player.
Yes, it was. Yeah, I know the guy you're thinking of.
He had his career, but then went to Colchester.
It's Ray Crawford, isn't it?
It was Ray Crawford. Spot on.
Yeah, the ex-Ipswich striker.
Yeah.
So how you moved on to Norwich afterwards? How did that come about?
Well, I mean, the ironic thing was that as a schoolboy, I was a right winger. That was my job because I was quite quick and I could put good crosses into the box for the other players at my school. And I've just been a right winger for all of my teenage years. And then when I signed for Rochdale, the very first game I played in, they stuck me up front. And I'd never played up front in my life. And I got some great advice for a lad who was my friend who played for Rochdale. He joined Rochdale from Peterborough, a lad called Bobby Downs, who you might recall, because Bobby played for Barnsley. And he gave me advice. I just said to him, I'm playing up front tonight and I don't know what to do because I've never, ever played it up front in my life. And I was 18 years of age. And he said, I'll tell you what to do. He said, wherever the ball is on the field, make sure that player can see you. So if it's the right back or the left back, make sure you're running across the pitch so that he can clip a ball up down the line. If I've got it in midfield, because he was a midfield player, Bobby, if I'm in midfield, he said, just come off a little angle off the centre half so that I can see you, I can give it to you. And then once I've given it to you, give it back to me and then get in the box. And whatever comes in either from the midfield or from either wing, get on the end of it and see what you can do. And basically, I did that for the next 20 years. That's so simple.
Yeah.
How to striker. And that's all I did for the next 20 years. And it worked because I was never going to be a Johan Cruyff or a George Best, but I realised that I was 6'2", so I was going to be a finisher, and I used to just go in the box and battle centre halves, and that's really how I got my goals record, and that's why I think Rob Saunders, who was the manager at Norwich, got a bit of a tip about me. And they signed me at Norwich, and I had 2 seasons there. And the 3rd season there was when Joe Mercer and Gordon Milne came for me.
In fairness, David, that's good advice for a striker nowadays. In fact, that's what you want from your striker. Make yourself visible.
Well, absolutely right. It sounds simple, but it's so clear that because bear in mind, I'd been a right winger, never played up front in my life. The first time I played up front was for Rochdale's first team in a professional match, and I didn't know what to do. So the advice I got from Bobby Downs, who had 2 seasons at Peterborough, he just said, well, whoever's got the ball, make sure he can see you. If it's the fullback, even a centre half or a midfield player, get on a run so that player can see you. Once you get the ball, get it under control, give it one of the other players, another midfield player or a winger, and then get in the box and get on the end of it. And that is all I did for 20 years. And it worked because it was very simple. And when you analyse football, it is a very simple game. And I remember reading, I can't think whose book it was. Yes, it was Don Howe. Don Howe's book, and the foreword to that book, his autobiography. You know what I mean by the foreword? You know, the little quote before got to chapter 1, and it said, and it really rang true. The foreword to Don Howe's book said, "Football is a simple game. It's the players that make it complicated," and that's absolutely true. It's so simple, isn't it, when you think about it? There's a goal at that end. There's a goal at your end. Don't let them score at that end and try and score at that end. It's simple. Yeah. And that basically was what advice I took and did. That's what I did for 20 years of my career. And it worked, obviously, because once you play with very good players, when I moved, I mean, obviously some good players at Coventry, like Willie Carr and Ernie Hunt, Dennis Mortimer, Nick Maguire. But then when I moved to West Ham and Trevor Brooking and people like that were playing, and they just put the ball into the box. I don't know if any one of you can remember Trevor Brooking playing, but
of course,
the only player I've ever seen in the modern game who does what Trevor Brooking used to do, and it's something I learned at West Ham when I moved there, and it was Kevin De Bruyne does it now. He does what Trevor Brooking used to do, which was wherever he was, if he could get in a wide position, even though he was facing the other way, so with his back to goal, but if he was in the final third of the pitch, even though he was with his back to goal and going maybe to the corner flag, he'd put the ball in the penalty area. He would just whip it into the penalty area. And centre halves didn't realise that was going to happen, because once they saw a player going towards the corner flag with his back to the goal, then they just kind of relaxed. And I would make a run to the near post, knowing that Trevor was going to put it in, and the centre half wouldn't come with me because he would be thinking, what on earth is this idiot doing? But then I'd just get on the end of it and tap it in. And Kevin De Bruyne, playing for Manchester City, he does exactly what Trevor Brooking used to do. You watch him play, De Bruyne, doesn't matter where he is. If he's in the final third, he just puts the ball in the box. And City strikers, big Haaland, knows that that's going to happen, and you can make a run, lose the defender, and just tap it in. It sounds simple, but that's what I did for 20 years.
Yeah. You make it sound very simple.
Well, it is. That's what I'm saying. Don Howe's quote, football is a simple game. It's the players that might make it complicated.
Yeah.
And if you look at games now, I mean, to be honest, I don't watch the games now on television. I'll watch the FA Cup. I'll watch the games in a lower division if there's a lower division game on. But the Premiership now, the players pass it backwards to the goalkeeper. The goalkeepers now have more touches than the strikers. It just bores me to tears. You know, our fans would have gone mad 40 years ago.
Yeah.
The way they play now, just passing back to the goalkeeper all the time. So it's now seems to be a case where when we played, we wanted to win. Now, because it's so important for Premiership teams not to be relegated, it's more important for them not to lose.
Yeah.
So we wanted to win. Teams now want to make sure they don't lose, because if they don't lose every game, they'll have enough points and they won't go relegated.
Yeah.
And that's why the Premiership game now, I mean, I honestly don't know how fans can pay £100 to go and watch a match like that and just see the way the game's played now. It's a much more interesting game when you watch an FA Cup tie or a League Cup tie or a lower division team game, because they play the way we used to play.
But isn't it about fear and money in the modern game?
Absolutely, because if you stay up in the Premier League, you get all the cash again.
Yeah.
Next. If you go down, you're likely to. I know you get the money that you can get by going down, but if you stay up, and staying up for most teams in the Premier League, most clubs know that they're not going to win the Premier League.
Yeah.
The main aim, don't go down. If you don't go down, you'll get the big money, television. And so it's a different game now. Whereas we wanted every game I played, get out, the orders were get out there and win. Now it must be get out there and whatever happens, don't lose. Because if you draw every game, you'll stay up.
Jim, when we signed David, was he a record signing? I'm just...
Yes, he was. Yes. I think the year before David signed, we'd bought Tommy Hutchison and Colin Steen for about 140,000, but then David topped them he cost 150,000 from Norwich.
It was a bit more than that.
Was it?
Yeah, it was 180,000.
Was it?
But it was a record for
Norwich
selling me, and it was a record for Coventry buying me.
What happened? How did the transfer work with Norwich?
Well, I got a phone call from Ron Saunders, who was the manager of Norwich, and he said, there's been a bid for you. And I said, well, I don't want to leave Norwich. You know, we'd got promotion. It was a young side. We clubbed together. There was no star players. We did have one really good player, which is Graham Padden, who, funnily enough, had played as a youth team player. But we didn't have star players really. But we just worked hard. Ron Saunders, our manager, got us so fit. We just outran every team we played against and got promoted from the second division and moved into the first division. So what is now the Premier League. But you know, it was just because I scored goals for Norwich. Then I had this offer to go to Coventry City, and I said I don't want to go because it's so good here, and I've learnt so much here. I mean, I was only 20 when I was at Norwich City, and I was still a young player learning. And the fact that Ron Saunders had us so fit and such a good team performance rather than individuals, and I didn't want to leave, and I said I don't want to leave. And the manager at the time said, "You are leaving. Coventry have so much money for you." I mean, I was actually told it was £220,000 that was the fee, but they said, "We need that money. You're going to have to go." So, but it was the best thing I ever did because I had such a great time at Coventry. All my friends, really, after I'd left school, were just the players that I played football with at Rochdale and then at Norwich. But when I moved to Coventry, all my pals were lads who worked in the car factories, in the Jaguar, and with the Rover. But they all worked. All the lads who I went out for a drink with on a Saturday night and a Sunday were just ordinary Coventry lads who had worked in the car factories, and they were just my mates, not the players. A couple of top watch was a friend of mine, obviously John Craven, but the main lads who I went out with for a pint were just ordinary Coventry lads who worked in the car factories.
Yeah.
And that was the best thing for me because it made me feel so welcome. But ironically, one of my brothers, Tom, who is now 80 but still alive, he was born in Coventry. So it was kind of a natural thing, I mean, it's such a beautiful city that back then as well. I mean, they'd done all the new stuff, hadn't they? You've got all, but there's still all the old bits. I lived on. I'm trying to think what the road was called. I lived by the golf course. As I went over to Kenilworth Road. What's the golf course?
Finham.
Pardon?
Is it Finham?
No. It's the memorial.
It's by the Memorial Park, isn't it? The golf course near there.
Oh, Hersal.
Yes. Well, I lived just off there, Beechwood Avenue. It's
called.
Oh
yeah.
Beechwood Avenue. Yeah.
I lived there, and it was just such a lovely city to be in. I mean, it was a city, but didn't feel like a city because it's not huge, is it, Coventry?
No, and the south side of the city is very nice, isn't it?
Yeah. But,
so, do you remember your debut for Coventry at Ellen Road?
Vaguely. Was it a cup tie?
No, it was a league game.
Right. I mean, that wasn't because Leeds were the big
Leeds. Yeah, they were top of the league. I think they won the league that year.
Yeah, they were massive. They had all the players in there: Johnny Giles, Billy Bremner, Norman Hunter, Jack Charlton. So yeah, they had really, really good players. In fact, by playing against Leeds several times was the reason years later that Johnny Giles bought me when I was at West Brom, from Coventry to West Brom, and I just said to him, "I can't believe you bought me," knowing where you come and the player that Johnny Giles was. And he said, "I remember playing against you in the FA Cup," and he said, "Norman Hunter and Jack Charlton came off the pitch after that game and said, Christ, that centre forward isn't half hard to play against. He never stops moving. He's physical. He gets on the things and gets in the box and scores. And he said, because Jack Charlton and Norman Hunter didn't really want to play against you, that made me, that's Johnny Giles, wanted to buy you. So, and Johnny Giles actually bought me 3 times. He took me to West Brom.
Yeah.
Then he, after I'd left West Ham and went to Manchester City, he bought me for Vancouver Whitecaps.
Right.
And he left Vancouver Whitecaps and went back to West Ham again, and he bought me again. So he bought me 3 times.
Wow.
And that was possibly the biggest ego thing for me, to think a player like Johnny Giles wanted to buy me, and not only buy me once and see me, but wanted to buy me 3 times, because he must have thought that the job I did was good for him. Get on the end of thing. Basically, all I wanted to do, as I said earlier, was chauffeur the ball, get it down, give it the good players, get in the box. When the ball came into the box, get on the end of it, even if it meant getting hurt to get on the end of it. It didn't matter. Just as long as I could get on the end of it and score a goal, I didn't care whether the centre halves kicked me, booted me, elbowed me in the face. Just so long as I could get on the end of it, put it in the box, that was enough for me.
Well, your first stint at Albion, you got a goal every other game, so I can see why he kept buying you. The record speaks for itself.
I'm not sure how many goals I got for West Brom. I think I was only there a season, and then West Ham came in for me. But I mean, West Ham was probably my biggest club in terms of, and I had 5 seasons there, and we won the FA Cup, which is a huge thing. But my goal record at West Ham, before I got to West Ham, my goal record was a goal every 3 games. And when I was at Rochdale as a kid, Reg Jenkins, who was Rochdale centre forward, said to me, this is when I was 17, just signed for Rochdale, and he said, if you score a goal every 3 games in a 42-game season, you get 16 or 17 or 18 goals, you'll always get a contract the next season. Because they're looking for goal scorers, and the 16, 17, 18 is about right. But when I moved, that's a goal basically every 3 games. But when I went to West Ham, and I know I'm going on from the Coventry setup, but my goal at West Ham, I played 200 games and got 99 goals. So I got a goal every 2 games, which was a massive improvement on the goal every 3 games, which is seen in professional terms as a centre forward's main target. Get about 17, 18, 19 goals, and someone will buy you, even if you don't get a contract for that club that you're playing for. Someone else will buy you because they want goals.
Yeah, well, you certainly, your home debut for Coventry was you got 2 goals against Sheffield United.
Oh yeah, that was a cup game, wasn't it?
No, it was a league game. Yeah.
Oh right. Yeah, I do remember. I mean, yeah, that was important to get. If a club sign you because they want to buy a goal scorer, the one thing that can happen is you go 6 games without scoring, and then the fans, everyone's thinking, what on earth have the club done buying this idiot? But get a couple of goals on the home debut, straight away, people might. And don't get me wrong, guys, I know what I was as a footballer. I know I wasn't the most clever footballer, most intelligent, but I realised very early, if you scored goals, fans like you.
Yeah.
Won games, even though they might not think he's not know whether he's talented or whether he's tricky with the ball or dribbles past people. But if you score goals, it solves everything, because score goals, your team wins. And if your team wins, fans go home at 5 o'clock Saturday night, go and have a drink, and they're happy. And if they're happy because you won, they look at why you've won. oh, that idiot up front's got 2 goals, and then they like you. So scoring was a massive aim for me throughout my whole career. If I scored goals, I knew that I would get on with the fans, and they would want me to be playing.
Well, David, when you signed for us, you played alongside my boyhood hero, Colin Steen. What was he like to play with?
Yeah, good. I was in awe of him, really, because I remembered his Glasgow Rangers times and his Scotland games, and playing with him was, again, it was a learning curve. Again, I was only 22 when I signed for Coventry. When you look at that, it's a young lad, and playing with Colin Steen, as I say, I was in awe of him, thinking, how am I, the lad from Haywood, playing with this bloody lad, who's so famous? And we got on quite well together. I think our goal scoring record together was quite decent. But Colin was good. I mean, the lads at Coventry, they were all good lads. That was the big thing for me, that I'd signed for, I think it was 200,000, something like that. And, there's always pressure on you when you go for big money, and you go to a new set of players thinking, what are they going to think of me? But they were all good lads. They were the youth team lads who'd come up, Nick Maguire, Dennis Mortimer, Alan Green, Brian Alderson. What else am I thinking of?
Jimmy Holmes.
Jimmy Holmes. But
Bobby Parker.
It was a blend of that youth team who'd won the Youth Cup about a season before, or maybe a season and a half. Oh, Alan Dugdale was the other one. Tough to half, Alan. But they'd come through the youth setup. But the blend with those inexperienced players, with Tommy Hutchison, John Craven, Colin Steen, that was a good blend, because you've got 6 or 7 young players, but 4, 5 or 6 experienced players, and that was a good blend of team.
Yeah.
And it worked. Gordon Milne, was reasonably happy with what went on.
Yeah. And of course you had Bill Glazier in goal.
Yeah, Bill was in goal,
Yeah. So what are your memories of Bill?
I don't know whether I should say this. I've never known anyone who could drink as much as Bill. I've never known anyone who could drink after a match and drink till 2 a.m. and then be up at 11 the next morning, Sunday, and go back in the bar and be drinking all afternoon again. I've never known anyone who could drink like Bill. But he was a fantastic goalkeeper, really was. One of the best goalkeepers I played with. I mean, Neil Ramsbottom came as well. He came after Bill, didn't he?
Yes. Yeah, the following season,
Yeah, but Bill was incredible. I mean, I'd never believed that you could drink alcohol and be a good footballer. I had to be as fit as I could. As I say, I knew my limits. I knew I wasn't the most skillful player, but I knew what I could do. I knew I was a good runner. I was reasonably quick, and I knew I could score goals. So everything really relied on my fitness, and there was no way I was going to go drinking all afternoon anywhere. I knew I had to be as fit as I could possibly be to be a decent player at that level.
Yeah. That first season, Coventry reached the. They had a very good FA Cup win over Derby. After they had a goalless draw at Highfield Road in front of 40,000, and then they went to the baseball ground, and I think you scored the winner, didn't you, in extra time?
I honestly don't know. I mean, I might have, but I can't remember.
You did.
I can't remember the home tie or the away tie.
Right.
Um,
And then in the next round, we got drawn against QPR. Again, we drew at home and went to Loftus Road for the replay. And it was, you scored 2 goals and we lost 3-2, a goal in the last minute.
Dan Bowles scored for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember that.
The Derby game was the first ever Sunday match as well, wasn't it? Is that right?
It was, yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
because it was the winter of discontent, wasn't it? It was the power strike was on. We were having to play afternoon games without floodlights.
Yeah, that's why you had to play in afternoon games, wasn't it? And
yeah,
at times because of the, as you say, the strikes.
Yeah. It was a bit of a frustrating season because Coventry had a really good start and they did well in the League Cup, got to the quarterfinals, but I think you must have been cup tied. And we got drawn against Man City and drew 2-2 at Highfield Road and were leading 2-1 in the replay at Main Road when Man City scored 3 late goals to knock us out.
Right, I don't recall that at all. You say I was cup tied?
You were cup tied for the League Cup, but then you played in the FA Cup. Yeah,
that makes sense because the FA Cup I wouldn't have played until January, would I, for the previous club? Whereas the League Cup has been played from October, isn't it?
Yes.
And I think I signed in November for Coventry, if I remember right.
Yes.
And there were two afternoon matches as well, weren't they, Jim?
They were, and as I say, Coventry were leading 2-1 at Main Road, and they scored 3 in the last 12 minutes. Francis Lee got his usual penalty by diving, and Dennis Law scored one as well.
Wow. I mean, when you look back and you're talking Francis Lee, Dennis Law, I mean, they were star players, weren't they?
They were. Yeah.
I was just a kid from Rochdale who happened to be good enough to score goals, and I'm playing against them. And we played at Old Trafford and playing against George Best. In fact, in George Best's the last goal George Best scored for Manchester United, in that game, I scored for Coventry and we beat them.
Yeah, that's right. That was George Best's final goal. Yeah,
like the winning goal. And Best's last goal for Manchester United at Old Trafford. And when I think I'm playing against George Best. Wow.
Yeah.
So footballers, we're all just ordinary lads who became footballers, and then because you become footballers, you get a bit of fame. But when I was a little lad growing up, I never ever dreamt that I would even meet a professional footballer. Not just playing against one, to play against George Best. And that Man United team with Dennis Law, it's just it was just like a dream for me to be playing. Thinking where I started playing, I left school at 18. I got 6 O levels, 3 A levels. Was going to go to university, and then Rochdale signed me, and all of a sudden I'm now playing against these fantastic players, and it's hard to believe. That was one good thing for me. I never ever had an ego. I always thought, when I looked around on the pitch and saw their 11 and the other 10 in my team, and I always felt I was probably the worst player on that field. But because of that thinking, I knew I had to work hard. I knew I had to graft. I had to be tough. I had to make sure centre halves didn't want to play against me. I do remember when I worked with Ian Dowie later on in my career when I was coaching, and he said that he'd met when he got the Oldham Athletic manager's job, he went over to Ireland to watch a game because he was Irish. I mean, he wasn't really Irish, but he got Irish connections, so he could play. But he went to watch an Era game, and on the plane. He sat next to Mark Lawrenson, a Liverpool centre half, and Mark Lawrenson said to Ian Dowie, "Oh, you've got a job, haven't you, somewhere? You've got a manager's job or a coach's job?" And he said, "Yeah, I've got the Oldham Athletic job, manager, yeah." And he said, "Oh, that's good. Who's your coaches? Who's your assistant manager?" I said, "The assistant manager is a lad called David Cross." And Mark Lawrenson said, "Oh, Jesus Christ." And Ian said, "Oh, no, what, have I made a mistake signing David Cross? Is he not a very nice bloke?" And Mark Lawrenson said, "Oh, no, good lad, Crossy. He's a real good lad. We always get on well with him. But I hated playing against him. Just hated. Me and Alan Hansen, when we saw that we were playing against the team that he was in, thought, oh, Christ, we've got hard work on Saturday." Now, that was the biggest compliment I could ever have been gifted with. To think Mark Lawrenson and Alan Hansen don't want to play against me, a lad from Haywood who started at Rochdale, who didn't know how to play up front, and they didn't want to play me. And it was a massive ego boost for me. I mean, I'm not trying to be big-headed, please. I mean, I'm entirely the opposite. I was I'm the most humble player, really, that ever played, because I look back and I find it difficult to think I played 600 games and got 200 odd goals. I have to sometimes pinch myself. Think that is me.
Yeah, the stats don't lie, do they, Jim?
They don't. No, and you achieved that fantastic feat of getting a hat trick at Goodison Park on the opening day of the 75-6 season. Any memories of that?
Well, big memories, but not good memories in some respects, because I got that hat trick at Goodison Park, first game of the season. I got a hat trick at Turf Moor against Burnley, the last game of that season, and I only got about another 5 or 6 goals in between.
Yeah.
So I finished with about 17 goals, but 6 of them had come in 2 games. So the in-between bits weren't great for me. So I do recall that, obviously. I mean, you do remember your hat tricks because you get gifted the ball, even though you're playing an away, they do give you the ball. So, I've still got those in the cabinet here. But yeah, hat tricks were good for me because it meant the team won. If the team won, footballing nowadays, your wages were a standard wage, your basic wage, but the bonuses were what really made it worthwhile. So if I was on, say, £200 a week back 40 years ago, but we drew a game, that would be another £250. If we won, when it went to 3 points a game, we got £750. If there were 2 games a week, I'd come out that fortnight with £3,000 in the pocket. And that's, I'm going back 40 odd years, nearly 50 years.
Yeah.
That was a lot of money.
Yes.
Back then. I mean, people say to me now, who kind of meet me somewhere, and say, "Oh, I remember you were a footballer, weren't you? I bet you wish you were playing now, all the money they get." I said, "Well, yeah, I know what you mean." But I said, don't get me wrong. So I earned money. I said I had 2 brothers who were in the police force in Manchester. 2 elder brothers. I don't tell them how much I was earning, because they were doing 2-10, 10 till 6, 6 till 2 shifts, policemen, getting in trouble, having to do things, and they were getting measly wages. And I don't tell them how much I was earning, because it would have been a kick in the face for them to think that I was earning like £4,000 a week, back then, as I said, nearly 50 years ago, it's such a lot of money. Really was.
So that season when you got the hat tricks at the start and the end,
yeah,
what was going wrong in between that
I don't know. I don't know. I think it was maybe a team thing. I mean, it was very difficult. When you, as a goal scorer, if you're not scoring goals, it does not affect your mood. And you go out there, and if you've scored a hat trick last week, you think you're going to get another hat trick this week. Because you're full of goals. When you've gone 8, 6, 7, 8 games without scoring, it gets onto you. You think, well, maybe the truth's coming out here. Maybe I'm not that good. Maybe, and then you get down and you look at it the wrong way, really. And instead of being very optimistic, I became very pessimistic, and found it almost difficult to score goals. It was strange, those 3 at the last game of the season at Burnley. Just boosted my goal scoring record that season to about 16 goals, I think.
Yeah,
but 6 of them came from 2 games, so there's only 11. Only 11 come from the whole rest of the season.
So Colin Steen had gone back to Scotland by this time, and you were playing mainly alongside Alan Green, I guess.
Yeah, Green. Yeah, I mean, I got the big thing was for me that I got on well with the lads who'd come through the ranks. Greeny, Dennis Mortimer, Mick Maguire, they were my pals. Brian Alderson, they were my mates, really. And Jimmy Holmes. I didn't knock about with Hutchie and Stino and Bill Glazy and Mick Coop. I never knocked about with them. I was only 22.
Yeah.
And they were my age, Alan Dugdale, 19, 17, 18, 19 years of age.
Yeah.
22. So I'm kind of more their age than John Craven, 30 odd. Larry Lloyd, when Larry came, who's older as well. And those were my mates, the young lad. So, I never, ever felt like a top player. I knew what I had to do, which was work hard every single day of the week in training, so that I was fit enough to do the job of a goal scorer who has 2 jobs. Like I said right at the start of this conversation, the main job is getting a goal, but the basic job is to make sure that whoever has the ball on the pitch see me and deliver the ball to me. As I say, whether a fullback who can clip it up the line so I'll run onto it, or a midfield player sees me just coming off at an angle so they can give it me and I can give it him back. So, that was just, it was a basic game. As I said, back statement, I think it was Dave Sexton said, football's a simple game. It's the players who make it complicated. And when you look at it that way, it's right. If you look at the game now, watch a Premier League game now on the television with all the passing sideways and backwards to the goalkeeper. You think, what on earth these lads getting paid £200,000 a week to do this? And the number 9s never get a touch unless it goes in the box and it's Haaland and he gets on the end of it.
So the start of the following season, Gordon Mill the club decided to sell you to West Brom. Was that a shock?
Yeah, it was. It was. I think you kind of, there comes a time when you're at a club when you know it's time to go. You know that the fans who really used to like you are kind of just going off you a little bit. I did feel that it was time, but the odd thing, well, not the odd thing, but the first thing that I knew about going to West Brom was Terry Yorath, who took me aside one day and just said, I think you're going to be on the move, Crossy. I said, well, I don't want to be on the move. They said, well, I think the club wants to sell you. And then Terry was an experienced player, and he was like captain and close with the coaches and the manager. And he said, well, I think you might be on the move. I said, well, I don't want to move. I like it here. Coventry, I know my mate. You know, I've got a nice house. I'm single. I'm not married. Why do I want to leave? He said, well, I think you're going to go. I said, well, where am I going then? How do you know this? Because he knew Johnny Giles.
Right.
Johnny Giles had phoned him up and said, have a word with that centre forward of yours, just see, does he fancy coming to West Brom?
Right.
So I picked the tap up, which was illegal back then. You're not supposed to be, but it happens. You know, it certainly happened back then. I'm sure it happens now more, but because of all the communications and technology now. But yeah, Terry always just said, I think Johnny Giles fancies you as a striker. I think you might be going to West Brom. And then the next day I went in and Gordon Melm pulled me and he said, you know something, don't you? I said, I beg your pardon. He said, you know something, don't you? And I played dumb. I said, no, what do you mean? I know something. You know something. I can tell. Actually, it wasn't Gordon Melm, it was Ron Wiley. Remember Ron?
Yeah.
He said, you know something. And I had to tell a lie. I said, I don't know what you're talking about, Ron. He said, you know something. He said, I can tell. Anyway, he did. He knew I'd been tapped up. And then after that training session that morning, when Ron Wiley had said, you know something's happening, don't you? And then I got called into the office and got told that West Brom were interested in me, which Johnny Giles had phoned me up the night before. So I didn't know. So I had to tell a lie, but because it wasn't legal, I think, you're not supposed to be tapped up back then. I mean, now it must go on all the time, but yeah, and I found out, and I went to West Brom, and that was a big ego thing for me, Johnny Giles buying me.
Yes.
And again, taking me to Vancouver and then buying me back again for West Brom. So for Johnny Giles to buy me 3 years, it was really a big thing for me, thinking, well, Giles bought me and he thinks I'm good enough to take me one club, another club, and then back. Wow. I don't think I'm that player, but obviously Giles did.
One player you mentioned a little while ago is Larry Lloyd, who was a very controversial figure at Coventry, in that it was his massive fee that the club paid that got us into a big financial trouble, and he didn't exactly shine at Highfield Road. What are your memories of Larry?
Well, funnily enough, I was the only lad that really got on with Larry. I would go and pick him up because none of the other lads really got on with him, because if you think about it, he'd come from Liverpool. Liverpool were massive.
Yeah.
And Larry come as a big star player, top money, big transfer fee.
Yeah.
And none of the other lads, they were always a bit wary of him. But it just took him on. And I just said, Larry, can I swear on here or not?
Yeah.
Right. I said, Larry, don't fuck about. Don't be your big star Liverpool player. Just be an ordinary lad here and you'll be all right. And I was the only one who was really a good pal of Larry.
Yeah.
I would go, I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll come and pick you up. I'll take you down for a beer down to the, what's the pub called down at the bottom of the ring road, on the roundabout right at the bottom before you go to Kenilworth.
The Rocket, was it then?
No, I can't think what it's called. Very famous pub. Right on the very last roundabout before you go to Brighton training ground.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, trying to think. In Brighton itself, like Blacksmith, something like that.
What it was called. It was a famous pub.
It's probably gone now.
Yeah. I'd pick him up, take him, have a couple of beers on Sunday night, and take him back to his digs, to his house where he lived, and then I'd go home. But I was really Larry's only pal because I took him on. I said to him,
Yeah.
Larry, don't fuck about. Don't
Yeah.
be a big star Liverpool player. You're playing for Coventry City. They'd give you a chance because at Liverpool, you're not going to get a game now because of who they've signed. So just get your head down, but don't be that big head. Just play.
Yeah.
And it helped him really. And he was my pal for a time, Larry. And tragically, he died young, didn't he?
He died about 3 or 4 years ago, I think, didn't he?
Oh no, crikey! It's long ago. He died. He died doing a run. He was on a road run, just trying to keep fit, and he collapsed and died. I'm sure it's years ago.
Yeah, I know he was in Spain running a bar at one stage.
Yeah, he was.
So how did you get on with Gordon Milne?
Yeah, good. Gordon was nice. I mean, he was different. I'd played for Ron Saunders at Norwich, who was very, very fierce in terms of we had to be as fit as we could possibly be, because Norwich City's players weren't star players, but we were so fit. I'd never trained before, and I'd never trained as hard after my time at Norwich City. So moving to and meeting Gordon Milne, and obviously aware of his history with Liverpool, he was just a very nice man. He believed, rather than fitness, he believed in good footballers. He believed that being a good footballer was more important than just being a fit athlete. And I had to kind of turn that round. I had to learn a lot more from Gordon Milne, because we didn't train as hard at Coventry as we had at Norwich, but there was more emphasis on the football side rather than the fitness side. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
He liked football. He liked to play football, and the game how it should be. And no, Gordon was a nice man, very nice man. Tommy Casey was the coach, and Tommy was funny. I liked him. We got on well, me and Tommy, because he was a Newcastle United player back from the 50s, and that was my team as I was growing up. That was the team I supported, so I got on really well with Tommy. But he didn't mess about with the players. There was one or two he didn't like, and Tommy would definitely let the players who he didn't like know that he didn't like them.
Oh goodness! So just to sort of round things up, I know you were coaching. Was it with Blackburn at one stage, weren't you?
Well, yeah, not really. I just did the youth team down there for 3 or 4 months. So I worked at Oldham Athletic. I was the youth team coach there, then the reserve team coach, then the first team coach with Ian Dowie. I was his assistant manager. But the coaching side of it wasn't really for me. I mean, I knew the ins and outs, and I'd got O levels and A levels and would have gone to university. So I was reasonably bright and understood the logic of it. But trying to get that over to some players who looked at you as though they didn't know what on earth you were talking about. And so a lot of footballers weren't the brightest in the book. And I did get frustrated that some of the things I was trying to tell them, they'd nod their head, but then on the Saturday when they played, they just didn't do it. They did what they wanted to do. So I felt as though the coaching side wasn't. And that was probably a good decision, I think, because I got frustrated with the players at Oldham, some of them, because they were playing in the third division or the third tier. And, I felt like saying to them sometimes, you're looking at me. I'm trying to tell you what to do. You're looking at me as though I don't know what I'm bloody talking about. I've played 700 games at the top level, I've got 200 and odd goals, and you're playing in the 3rd division, and you think you know better than me.
Yeah.
How does that work? And so that was very frustrating for me, that lads like that looked at us, didn't take a notice of what I said. They just did what they wanted to do. And I used to say to them, I said, you'll think I'm being an idiot here. I said, but your attitude, that's why you're playing in the 3rd tier. Because you're not listening. I said, the one thing that got me playing at the top level was that I listened to the coaches and I did what they did. I did what they told me to do. And when you think about it, whatever someone's job is, you do what your manager tells you to do, and you're going to be successful, aren't you? It doesn't matter what you think the job is, whether you're a lorry driver, whether you're a warehouse man. If you do exactly what the manager tells you to do, and you do it well, you'll be successful. And that's the same in football. It's no different.
So I guess the only other thing to talk about is that 1981 League Cup semi-final, when West Ham met Coventry City, and Coventry came back from 2-0 down to win 3-2. And then we went to Upton Park and had that heartbreaking last-minute Jimmy Neighbour goal, which sent you to Wembley and sent our young Dave Sexton's, it was Gordon Milne's young team out of the League Cup.
Yeah, it was difficult that for me, because when you play against a team that you've played for, it's very difficult because, and this might sound stupid, you might go, yeah, I bet you did that. But believe me, I did. Whenever I scored a goal against a team that I had played for, I never celebrated. You know, if I was scoring goals for West Ham and we played Queen's Park Rangers or we played Everton and I scored, I would celebrate. If I played against Coventry and scored, or Norwich or West Brom, I never celebrated. I'd just put my head down and go back to the centre circle for the kickoff, because I felt that would be disrespectful to the fans. Liked me when I played for that team, and why should I then be so big-headed to be showing off in front of them? You know, it was like a kind of a I don't know what the word is to say. Respectful, really. It was respectful to the fans that I played for at Coventry and at Norwich. Scored against them. I didn't want to over-celebrate because I'd played for them and you know, they'd been good to me. So why should I be over-celebrating a goal to get on with the game? And so I did find that difficult playing against teams that I had played for.
You had a really... Sorry, Jim. You had a really strong... At the top of the show, I said how you had a really strong squad at West Ham, possibly one of the strongest that played in the 2nd division for years, and even now would still be regarded as a very strong team. Did you, I mean, although we were in the 1st division at the time, you must have still fancied turning us over? Because the one thing West Ham had for their advantage was the ground, the old bowling ground. Upton Park, to some people, such a difficult place to go to. So I suppose you must have fancied your chances, even though you were a Division 2 side.
Yeah, you're right. Upton Park was very difficult to play on Upton Park against West Ham. You know, I'd played against them, and it was a difficult place. It was very crowded, but the crowd were almost on top of you, behind the goals and squeezed in on either side. It was almost, if you slid over the touchline, you'd almost hit the barrier and be right in front of the fans. They could probably be right next to you and tap you on the head. So close. It was so, but it was. But yeah, what was the question again? I do go on about it.
Well, basically, you fancied your chances, even though you were a Division 2 team against
because
your side.
But when you think of the team we had,
Bill
Parks in goal, Billy Bonds, Trevor Brooking,
Alan Devonshire.
Alan Devonshire, but not many people knew Alan Devonshire back then because West Ham from Southall, a non-league club, but he was a fantastic player. And, you know, we did have very, very good players. And strangely enough, what I was saying about the way we trained so hard at Norwich City to get us so fit that we were a problem for every team, I was so surprised when I went to West Ham how hard we trained at West Ham. I was surprised because I knew the West Ham way, you know, Ron, John Lyle, football, you know, the beautiful game. But we trained so hard at West Ham, and I couldn't believe it because I'd always thought West Ham are, you know, an old-fashioned footballing team who pass it well and, you know, create chances. But fitness never ever came to, you know, never one thing you thought about West Ham. But when I went there, I found out how hard that we trained, and we trained hard. 3 times a week. We train morning and afternoon. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday we'd train morning, have lunch, train again in the afternoon. So, you know, the thing about West Ham being a footballing side, old-fashioned footballing, we were very, very fit as well.
David, it's been a really interesting hour talking to you and listening to your memories of the game. And I'd just like to thank you for coming on the show tonight and entertaining us. It's been great to see you.
I'd like to turn that round a little bit because it's good for me to talk to guys like you because it's you and the other 30,000 Coventry supporters who paid my wages and who made what I was. You know, me going to be at Highfield Road and going out there and getting cheered when I scored.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted every single one of those people to be my friends. But you couldn't do that. You couldn't go in the same pub as the spectators after the game. It wasn't the thing to do. So we had to go home and maybe sneak into a pub close by where you lived. But to meet people like you, it's you guys who make the game what it is. If there was no spectators, there'd be no football.
No.
Very true.
So for you guys to be doing this so that you could rewrite a little bit of history for the fans from those years ago, you did a great job. And, you know, I'm thankful for you to be interested in calling me and asking me to do this. I feel honoured.
Well, I mean, we're really pleased you're here because I was just a young lad when you signed for our club. And this is a scarf from 75, 76, if you can see this.
Yeah, I do, yeah. And
there's a young David Cross there with his hands on his hips.
Oh, right.
There's a photo of you. And I mean, I thought, David, from my memory, like you say, you're 6'2", you're very, very lanky, I think the expression is, arms and legs, and you were a handful for a lot of defenders. And I think you gave a lot of City fans a lot of pleasure at Highfield Road. And you know, I've heard lots of great things about you as I've been growing up, about David Cross, the goal scorer. Isn't that right, Jim?
Yeah. Very, very popular player with Coventry fans.
Well, I've got to say that my time at Coventry City made me realise that I had a career ahead of me. Because when I was gone to Norwich from Rochdale, it was just, why? What am I doing here? You know, from 3rd division, moving to the top of the 2nd division, and then 15 games later, playing in the 1st division. I couldn't believe really what had happened. But then when I came to Coventry, it all changed for me. You know, the atmosphere at the club was good. And we trained very hard. Pre-season training was very, very hard at Brighton. All my friends were not footballers. I didn't really, as I said, I've said it before earlier tonight, that I never really knocked around with any of the footballers from Coventry City. My pals were lads who worked at the Rover. and they worked in the car factories. They were my mates, and that brought me down to earth, because I realized, they used to say to me, "Why are you coming out with us?" I said, "Well, why should? Well, you're a footballer, and you Coventry's number 9." I said, "Yeah, but I'm just 23, same age as you, and I'm a northern lad who's just grown up. So lucky to be a footballer. Why shouldn't I? Why should I be my pals?" And they were my mates, and I still phone up a couple of the lads now. One lad who you'd remember very well. He wasn't really a football fan, but I kind of worked on the other side, where football fans wanted to meet me, but I was glad to meet this lad. And you remember him because he's Nigel Fletcher, who ran Lieutenant Pigeon.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Nigel was my pal, and a few other lads. But they were just normal, ordinary, working class lads. But that's what I was. But, I never realised or thought, because I was a footballer, I just was so lucky to be a footballer and to meet and to be going out with those lads in the Albert Club in
Elston.
That's where I lived, Beechwood Avenue in Elston. Just to be going in the Albany, having a game of snooker, and a pint of whose beer was it then? Wilson's? No.
M&B.
M&B or Apples.
Spot on, Birmingham Brew. Just going to have a couple of pints with those lads, and it just helped me to bring my feet back on the ground.
Well, you'll be pleased to know, David, the Albany is still there.
Ah, very good.
Definitely. Should we bid everybody a good night, Jim, I think?
Yes. Thank you again, David. It's been very entertaining.
I'm honoured.
We'll get the podcast up on the net and on the internet, and you'll see it on Twitter tomorrow.
Okay.
And if anybody listening or watching, have they contacted Jim?
Will people be listening now?
No, it'll go out later. It goes out later.
Oh, right.
Go out tomorrow, David.
Okay.
If you want to get in touch with us, you can contact me on the email claryborton@gmail.com. And if you've got any ideas, any suggestions for what we cover in the podcast, please drop me an email.
Look, what I've come across with you guys phoning me up and talking to me, you're just exactly what Coventry City's fans were. Just good people, wanted to watch good football, and having a good conversation. I'm honoured to be talking to you guys. You do a good job, so I'm thankful you phoned me up and contacted me to ask me. I feel honoured to 40 odd 50 years later to be asked to do this. It's a big thing for me.
Well, the pleasure was all ours, wasn't Jim?
Yeah. Well, good night, David.
Okay.
Well,
thank you very much.
No, it's all right. Call me David. You can call me what my wife calls me.
Is it
Dick?
We'll end it there.
Company business. Thank you very much. Thank you.